the Alpine German-speaking mission, it covers all of Austria, southern Germany, primarily Bayern, and then to Baden-Württemberg, and then most of Switzerland, so the German-speaking parts of Switzerland. I personally was never able to serve in Switzerland, visa problems, but in Switzerland, well, the mission language is Hochdeutsch, so you'll be trained in the High German, and but you'll learn to understand any of the dialects where you serve. Primarily, there's the Austrian dialect, there's Bäuerisch, then Schwäbisch, and then you get into Schweizerdeutsch, which most German speakers count as a different language. It's, from my understanding, I can't really say too much, it's Old German mixed with some other stuff, and I had a companion who had just come out of Switzerland, and he tried to teach me a little bit, and it was just like, what are you trying to say? The hardest thing with the language probably is just learning to adjust your ear to all of the dialects. I mean, the more you learn of High German, the better it will be to switch from dialect to dialect, just because you have a better overview of everything. But, I mean, in my first area in Wien, they speak Wienerisch. There was one time where I heard there's 3 guys, and they started speaking just in pure dialect. And my trainer, who was only a couple transfers away from going home, he's just like, I understood maybe like 10% of what they just said. And it was, so, and there's a different dialect for every area you serve in, but in school they teach High German, so everyone will be able to speak and understand High German. So it's not too big of a deal. It's just, there are some areas that are a little bit more so in the boonies in the countryside where a lot of the older generation will only speak dialect just because that's what they're comfortable with. Each of your areas will cover a ward. The church is reasonably small, like it's pretty good. You'll switch between wards and branches. The wards usually run at about 150. It's probably about average active attendance. Please don't quote me on these numbers. I'm not the best at numbers, but I mean, they're going to be a lot smaller than pretty much anything you're going to see here. Well, yeah, a lot of the active wards will be about the size of your average student ward. With Austria, it's a little bit slower than Germany, I think. I mean, I haven't served everywhere in Austria, but from my experience, I served in Vienna, one of the really big cities, the biggest city in Austria. And then I served in Hagen-Halsbach, which is the least populated of our areas. That was a small branch. That was a cool area to serve in because that's where the church started in Austria. That's where they had their first baptism, so it was just kind of cool to see that church history there. A lot of older families had been in the church for quite a while. They're really cool. The growth is slower, like it is in most of Europe, but I'd honestly think that is going to change within the next couple of years significantly. While I was on my mission, I got to see an interesting change from, I guess what you call kind of the traditional way of doing missionary work to more of this, I don't know, the newer ideas that have been coming up. Switching and focusing, instead of having the missionaries be pretty much purely responsible for going out and finding people to teach, to working primarily with the members, to spending the time that we're not teaching with members, working to reactivate members and working with the active members to help them invite their friends to come into the church. Germans are very private people. It's not, I wouldn't say it's not socially acceptable, but it's very strange to just talk to a stranger on the street and just to start talking about personal subjects, especially religion, because that's considered one of the more private topics. And so for a strange American to just kind of stop you on the street and say, hey, what do you think about God? A little weird. Most of the time you get the response, ugh, I don't have time, I'm busy, not really interested, don't want to talk about it. Because it's just not really comfortable for most Germans. Whereas when they're talking to someone that's their friend that they know is a Mormon, they've kind of seen them interact, they have a greater opportunity to begin really talking about the gospel. And it opens doors. Of the people I taught, the greatest experience, or I should say the most effective experience in teaching, was one where the investigator was introduced to the church by a member. And those are generally the teaching records you find that lead to baptism, that lead to activity, which is probably one of the hardest things out there, is just keeping someone active. Because you're living in a world that, well, it ain't Utah. Religion's not a huge thing out there. I mean, most people in my mission are Catholic. It's kind of the Catholic central of the German-speaking world. They're born Catholic, they're raised Catholic. Most of them will, as they say, they'll die Catholic. But it's more of a tradition than anything else for a lot of the people out there. There's a lot of good people, and I led a lot of very, very faithful Catholics who are an example to me. But in general, and I think it's kind of more of a feeling throughout Europe, is just kind of a turn away from active religion. And I'm pretty sure it just comes from the history of what the continent of Europe has been through the last couple 100 years. When you work with the members, you find those people who are interested but wouldn't respond, so to say, to just someone stopping them on the street. And I really think that's going to change how things work in my mission especially, and hopefully throughout all of Europe.